Sometimes when you're driving down the road all by yourself, you begin to hear a voice that tells you need to look around, pay attention. Maybe something isn't quite right. That voice is me. It's the voice of Gord. G'day everybody, welcome to another episode of Voice of Gord. Listeners to this show who've been around since the beginning will remember one of my early interviews with a fellow by the name of Chace Barber. Works for an outfit in BC called Edison Motors, building diesel-electric hybrid trucks. Well, on today's episode, Chace returns to give us an update on the progress Edison Motors is making, especially with their brand new prototype truck they've named Topsy. While I was speaking with Chace and recording this episode, which was only a little over a week ago, Chace told me that he was going to be in Ontario and displaying Topsy at this little truck show over in Vineland. So I said, well, I better come up and visit you and get to see you in the flesh and visit the truck. So that I did this past Saturday. Myself and former guest and associate Brandon Daly drove on up into Canada and checked out Topsy and listened to Chace hold court and got to meet many awesome people. And I even convinced my old friends at Earl Paddock Transport to send their Hayes Clipper out to the show so we could see the past and future of British Columbia truck manufacturing at one show. It was pretty cool, I have to say. I'm in the process of writing a Substack article on it full of photos, which I'm going to link to in the show notes to this podcast, as I will, I'm going to have it as a standalone podcast on Substack and Spotify and on my other podcatchers. But yeah, if you click on that link, it'll take you to a visual Substack, and there'll be photos and a little description of everything that went down, and I hope you guys enjoy that. Other housekeeping, I'm going to be on the road for a couple of weeks with the aforementioned Mr. Brandon Daly, heading out to Front Porch Republic in Madison, Wisconsin next weekend, and then to a sort of hush-hush conference of sorts I'm not at liberty to discuss quite yet, and then possibly going to Nevada to visit my friend Kevin Bowman, the airport mayor, who's currently battling pancreatic cancer. That's to be determined. But anyway, I'm going to try and pre-record and pre-release a few episodes for you guys whilst I'm away. If that doesn't happen, now you know why. But in the meantime, while we're here, just wanted to say g'day to everybody down under. As you guys know, I'm syndicated on the Australian On The Road Radio Network, streaming live via an app you can download onto your phone, whether you're dragging three of the bastards up the Stewart Highway or coming down the Coquihalla Pass in BC. You can listen to Mike and Yogi and all that great programming from down under. And like I said, g'day to anybody down in Australia or New Zealand or wherever listening to Voice of Gord. As always, this show is free and shall hopefully remain so forever and ever. All I ask is that you guys share the show. If you know any other truckers or other interested parties, send it to them. Have them subscribe to my Substack. This is a gift to y'all, and the more people I have the chance to give it to, the better. All right, well, let's get to Mr. Chace Barber of Edison Motors. All right, g'day everybody. Welcome to another episode of Voice of Gord. I'm Gord. This is my voice. The other voice you're going to hear, if you're a long-time listener to this show, or you hang out on Trucker TikTok, or you're an electrical vehicle nerd, you totally would have heard this guy and his very unique and very Canadian voice. Welcome back to the show, Mr. Chace Barber of Edison Motors.
Hey, well, thanks for having me back on, Gord. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, no, dude, your show with me has been like one of my number one downloaded podcasts. You're like,
no way.
Yeah, you're like totally in the top 5.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep. Yeah, no, people love to hear it. There's a lot of nerds out there and, people that are interested in just trucks and tinkering and what's going on with electric technology and all that stuff. And you're just an entertaining and thoughtful guy, and people seem to like you.
Yeah, right on. I'm not
I,
sure what goes on there, but
Hey, oh, maybe your fiance doesn't. Apparently, she's taken off for the weekend and left you at home all by yourself.
yeah. No, she's taking off there for Thanksgiving, and
Yeah, well, we're recording on what's the date today? October 7th, and
yeah,
it's
so it's
so
Thanksgiving weekend here.
Thanksgiving weekend in Canada. Thanksgiving is more well known as an American holiday, and that happens near the end of November.
Yeah, we
Canadian,
have it a month earlier than you guys,
yeah,
which
yeah,
makes sense. I mean, really, Thanksgiving was like the end of the harvest time. So it was like when everyone would get together, the end of the harvest, and you'd put all the things and have a big harvest feast. But Canada is colder than the US, so our harvest occurs earlier in the year than the US harvest. So the Thanksgiving in Canada, like the big harvest festival, would be earlier in Canada.
right. I mean, thinking about it from a practical perspective, as you know, cultural institutions take on a meaning and a life of their own, especially when they're as old as Thanksgiving in the U.S. I don't think Thanksgiving in the U.S. has anything to do with harvesting anything, but
I think that's how it started, though, back in the day.
maybe
I
I'm
don't know.
not.
I'm just listening to what one guy on TikTok said for explaining it, and I'm just repeating what he said. He could have been totally full of shit, but it sounds really good. And I'm like, yeah, that
Yeah,
sounds about right. That's probably it.
yeah, and as a guy on TikTok yourself, but you are an expert though. Like you actually know what you're talking about, is what which is why people like you so much. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring you back on the show, you are, one of the big cheeses, one of the OG partners at Edison Motors, and you're building these diesel electric logging trucks. And I would encourage my listeners, if you have not yet heard the interview I gave with Chace here, I think it's the sixth or seventh or eighth episode of my show. Just go to Spotify or Apple or my Substack or wherever and scroll down and find that first one. And Chace lays it all out, all the details, all the info, the history of Edison Motors, the history of Chace Barber as this, Renaissance man, trucker, intellectual, electrical engineer, entrepreneur, awesome guy. Go back and listen to that one. And the update is that Edison Motors has got a fully built diesel electric truck on the road. Tell us, Chace, what's going on?
Yeah, we just debuted our first truck at the Fully Charged Show down in Vancouver a few weeks ago. And it's actually back in Ontario right now, going through its testing and optimization and getting all that data out of it.
Did somebody drive it to Ontario, or did you put it on a float?
No, we low betted it. I've got permission to drive it on the road in BC, but I do not have the permission to drive it across Canada yet, out of the province. So I have like a BC assigned VIN, but I can't just drive it across the country. It's got to go through a safety inspection.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you a little story, and I hope my cousin Jason is probably going to listen to this and maybe either get mad or correct me on details I may have gotten incorrectly. But trucking's a family affair for a lot of people. Both my uncles were truckers. My dad was a trucker, and my uncle Bruce was a logger up in northern Ontario. He lived in a little place called Armstrong, which is 150 miles north of Thunder Bay. Most people hear the name Armstrong and they think about the Armstrong in BC, which I believe was that Okanagan Valley, or is it near Penticton or something?
Yeah. That's Okanagan there. Yep.
Yeah. So, but there's an Armstrong in Ontario. Back in the day, it had a much higher population, but right now it's about 800 people. 150 miles due north of Thunder Bay. But anyway, my uncle Bruce used to drive logging trucks, hauled lots of pulp down to Thunder Bay. And at one time, he also hauled equipment all around the bush, doing low boys. Some guy in Rocky Mountain House, Alberta, bought a feller buncher off of one of his associates in Ontario. And they asked my uncle Bruce to haul it from Armstrong all the way out to Rocky Mountain House. And my uncle Bruce's logging truck was only sort of registered for Ontario. He didn't have an IFTA, he didn't have registration anywhere in Manitoba or Saskatchewan or Alberta or nothing. And he didn't really want to pay for it. So he just went anyways. And he just moved at night and slept during the day. And he got himself all the way to Rocky Mountain House with a wide load feller buncher and then all the way back to Ontario and
That's
never
the way to
got
do it.
caught and nobody knew the wiser. And I don't think he got registration or paid for a wide load permit or nothing the whole way there or the whole way back.
That's the way to do it. That's the way to do it. Unfortunately, there's a little bit more eyes on us. Topsy is a little unique. I don't think it's just going to be rolling by people and be like, I wonder what that truck was.
Right. Is that Topsy? Is that the name of
Topsy is the name of our truck. We give all
right?
our trucks names instead of unit numbers because I don't like unit numbers. I like names.
Right. Well, the whole idea of like a driver number, you get like lots of guys that work for these big carriers and they call into their dispatch and the truck's got a number, the driver's got a number. It's all very impersonal. And the fact that you give your trucks names like imbues some sort of life force to these
Yeah.
creations you've built. So you've got Old Blue, which is the old Kenworth,
Yeah.
and Topsy, as I understand it, is like frame up, completely brand new truck.
Yeah, we built that thing from the frame up. We had a manufacturer build the frames. We drilled every single hole in those frames. We went and ordered new suspension, new hangers, cross member. Like we built everything on this truck from the ground up.
Awesome. And so, yeah, I guess, I've seen photos, single cab, no passenger seat, centered in the middle of the truck.
It does have a passenger seat, yeah.
It does. Where?
So it folds down. On the old, like my old 1969, the old 1962 Kenworths, the passenger seats used to fold down. And they would have like a cup holder thing, a lunch box holder. So because they had an old needle nose Kenworth and the cabs were small, they'd have a little storage thing on the passenger seat. And then we didn't have when you had a passenger, you'd flip it up. So we did the same thing. So you have a little like cup holder thing, and then it flips up, and then that's your passenger seat because you don't always have a passenger with you. You might as well use it as like a cup holder and whatnot when you're
Right. Well, it's like the guys when I ran the ice, a lot of the guys that would run the ice every year, if they brought the same truck up on the ice, you don't have passengers. They would just rip the seat out and then use it for storage. You know,
yeah.
I used to work, speaking of the ice, I used to work with this guy named Jerry McCully, who was a Kiwi. He was a New Zealander and he moved to Canada when he was like 18 years old. So this would have been, oh man, back in the 60s or 70s. And somehow he ended up in Dawson City up in the Yukon. And then he got into fixing trucks and then got into trucking. I mean, I think he originally went to school and did his apprenticeship as like an automotive electrical guy. And anyway, he ends up living in the Yukon and then has a bunch of trucks. And so he used to go back and forth over the top of the world highway, hauled a lot of stuff in and out of Alaska. And then in the wintertime, he would run up on the ice for RTL. And he bought this old Freightliner FL off Westcam. And we were on the Mackenzie Valley Winter Road going up to like Colville Lake and Norman Wells and Tulita and all these little joints. And he'd ripped the seat out of this Freightliner and put in like shelves and he like wired in a microwave and a fridge and he had toolboxes. And so like no passenger seat, just all storage for like the necessities of like working in the sort of subarctic all by yourself, hundreds, if not thousands of miles away from help.
Yeah, that's a unique breed of trucker right there.
Yeah, Mr. McCauley is no longer with us, unfortunately, but a real legend, and it was my pleasure to get to work with him for a couple of years. But it sounds like you're imbuing again these sort of like through the fixtures in your truck, these sort of old school ways of doing things.
Yeah, I mean that's what we've tried to do with this whole truck. It's those old school ways that I hate planned obsolescence so much you have no idea. Like it's like I hate the fact that we just make junk now that lasts 4 or 5 years and then you throw it out and then you buy a new one. And everyone talks about environmental waste and environmentalism and like we need to be more sustainable. And like I get it, we do. So how about we talk about the fact that all we do now is we mine shit out of the ground, ship it over to China, build something out of it, ship it back over it, build something here, and then we take it for 3 years and then we throw it back in the ground. Like, what's the point? You take it out of the ground, you build something, and then 4 or 5 years later, you throw it back in the ground, and you want to talk about sustainability? Like the whole point of electric vehicles, like the reason why the government wants to do it is because it's sustainable. Well, how about you make an electric vehicle that lasts for 40 years and then come talk to me about sustainability? Like, yes, the batteries might last 10 years and then you got to swap them and do a rebuild kit. But don't swap the whole vehicle. Like, you don't need to throw up, but they're all made with super plastic dashes, computer programs that you can't service. Well, now you need a $300 technician that you to diagnose any fault code. Like, it's just junk and it makes no sense from an environmental point of view. So, like, the whole thing was like, we'll do it the old school way where a person could get ahead. You could buy a truck and that truck could last you 20, 25, 30 years, 40
So
years if you take care of
Edison
it.
Motors. So on that note, planned obsolescence and like it's sort of implied a critique is implied what you just said about like subscription services. So when someone buys an Edison Motors truck, there's not going to be like a plan where you have to update the software or they need to call Chace Barber to figure out the codes. Like it's your truck and you should be able to fix it yourself. That's what you're planning on building.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure the first few trucks will probably have to update the software as we learn a few things, but it's not like a paid software update. There's no subscriptions.
Right. So
But it's
one of the things I investigate on my show, and my Substack is called Autonomous Truckers, and I'm curious and want to find out about these robot trucks they're planning on unleashing on the roads and which are already operating in some places.
I
I
don't look into it. I It's not relevant to our industry at all. And we're focused on like, yes, there's personally, I hate the whole argument anyways. They're like, we're gonna have autonomous truck that can convoy and it's gonna be more efficient. You've made a shittier freight train, guys. All you've done is made a shittier freight train
or a
with your
shittier road
autonomous
train.
trucks. Yeah.
I had these guys on this Ask Us Anything show and they were talking about platooning, and I'm like, platooning is just the Australians figured this out with road trains years ago.
Like,
Um,
I feel like I'm losing my mind here because I'm saying these things at conferences. Like, they ask me to speak or ask questions. And, like, I went to one conference and they're going to say, like, oh, well, we're planning on this platooning thing. We're many trucks. And I'm like, hey, I should do a TikTok and say an Edison has announced an AI platooning way and then just show an Australian road train. I ought to just show this. But I asked that question around, like,
based.
I'm like, hey, isn't this just an Australian road train with more steps? And then
Yeah.
they're like, well, the law doesn't allow for road trains in like that in North America. So this is a way of getting, but you have to make a law to make the AI truck happen. If you can pass a law to let an autonomous truck go and solve all these things, but you can't make a law that says, hey, you can put on a few more trailers behind you. Like, what? Like, you can make a law for the AI, but you can't somehow make the law for the road train. Like,
Yeah,
Jesus.
I know. You're singing my song. But what I was getting at with the autonomous stuff is like on this platooning and everything. I have investigated some of these autonomous truck manufacturers or the system guys like Aurora and Wabi and Torque and AI, A Plus, whatever. There's a whole bunch of these companies. And if you go and look at their marketing copy and then their investment prospectuses, all of them, and they admit it in public. Like these guys have been on other podcasts and radio shows and TV, and they all tell you that when you buy, specifically Aurora, when you buy the Aurora platform, you go to Peterbilt and they sell you a 579, and then Aurora puts its technology on it, and then you subscribe to the Aurora driver subscription service. So to add insult to injury that they want to get rid of truck drivers, they're now going to make the trucking companies pay them a subscription to manage the software that runs the autonomous truck, right? So, like, none of this stuff is just like plug and play. Like, I bought the truck, now it's mine, and now I get to keep operating it. Oh, no, 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 no. You must buy a subscription in order for the thing to continue operating. Like, there's all this insidious little stuff that's like continually giving them money to make so that you can operate something you've already bought, right? And so that's
Yep.
why I'm asking the Edison platform, it's going to be your truck and yours alone, and you can fix it, and we're done. Like, see you
Yeah,
later.
I 100% promise you, I'm not putting a fucking subscription anywhere on there. Like we're working on an e-log program because I want a built-in e-log because I think it's stupid that if it's a requirement for a new truck to have an e-log, that you have to go and buy a second piece of hardware. Like, do what Europe does. You go and buy a Scania. It's got the tachograph built in from Scania. You don't have to subscribe to a second program. So just make it like, we'll just do it. We'll build it. turns out you need like $60,000 to certify it. So that's the holdup on that's got us right now. But if we
What?
raise a little bit more money in the future when we have to worry about it more,
This is
but
my
it'll just
this is
be
my
a free
surprised face.
program,
The
right?
$60,000 certification thing. This is my surprised face.
Yeah, right. It's free in the States. You can get certified for, I think, free, or it's like $1,000 or something in the States. It's like 60,000 in Canada. So like you need to produce at volume, but whatever. Like if we get to the point where we can sell hundreds of trucks, then it's only okay, $600 per truck if we sell 100 trucks. Then we do it, we put it into the cost of doing the truck, send the truck out, and the truck is just already has its e-log. It's built in to the dash, OEM, no extra stupid stuff, and it's not a subscription package.
Yeah, well, see, this is the thing is you've heard of this right to repair movement here in the US?
Oh yeah, oh
Because
yeah.
like, there's this big lawsuit against John Deere because farmers can't actually fix their own tractors
The
anymore.
farmers won that one though, eh?
Yeah. And I mean, this ties into the whole point where we have all these autonomous vehicles. Like, if you zoom out, as my friend Will Cook likes to say, the 30,000-foot view, there's systems of control implied with all this stuff, right? I don't know what happened if this actually became a thing, but in the aftermath of the Freedom Convoy, somebody suggested the idea that all new trucks in Canada should have like a remote shutoff mandated so that like, oh no, if you come downtown and protest and like actually demand your rights, we can just turn your car or your truck off. You know, I don't know if
Yeah,
they're going to get away with that, but
no, but who knows? They'll pass some bullshit on public safety because people could run from the cops, and the cops for public safety need to be able to take out a high speed pursuit, and it'll be used politically like that. To be honest, it bugs me that they're even saying, be like, oh, well, what if people start protesting? We need a way to stop. Like, I don't like it.
yeah.
I
Well,
don't like
anyway,
it,
enough
but
about that. Let's get back to the tech. Let's geek out on your truck. Remind
yes,
me, what was the new name you gave to your brand new truck?
Topsy.
Topsy. What was the name Topsy? Where'd that come from? What's that about?
Topsy was the name of the elephant that Thomas Edison electrocuted.
What? Fill me in.
Okay, so we're Edison Motors. So obviously the name of the truck needed to be Topsy because yeah, so they needed to the SPCA actually reached out to Edison Electric and said, "Hey, we've got an elephant that needs to be put down. It's killed a ton of people and can you electrocute it as a more humane way of they viewed it back in the day that electrocution was a lot more humane. It was quick, it was quiet, you fried it, it was done, compared to the old way of just slicing the neck of the elephant, or like the brutal way that they would have to kill the elephant, or like hitting it with a cannon in a very public like okay, they're like, okay, just electrocute it. And so yeah, he electrocuted it, but it's caused a big issue where one of those things where like, how do you dare you electrocute? Because now on today's standards, realistically, the circus performers were abusing that elephant. That's why it reached out, and people are like, that was absolutely bullshit that this elephant got electrocuted. You took it out of its home in Africa, made it perform tricks. Of course, that elephant's going to act up. You should have put it out to a wildlife park, or remediated this thing, or kept it away from people in more of a zoo exhibit than just killing it. So it got a bad rap after that. And it was kind of one of those things to like, okay, well, to pay our respects even a little bit to the elephant, because it did have a bad rap. Like, yeah, it was performing at a zoo. It wasn't happy. It was being kind of abused, and it acted out. That's not fair to the elephant. So we named our truck in honor of Topsy.
Wow, that's an amazing story. And if you have the sort of conspiratorial mind like mine, maybe not conspiratorial, but you seeing connections, right? Like elephants are workhorses in other parts of the world. Elephants haul things. They haul people around. Even Tolkien used them in Lord of the Rings, these sort of elephant-like creatures that were like, fighting in the final battle or whatever. And, elephants have this history of being like a type of workhorse, and that's what your truck is supposed to do.
Yeah, they are a workhorse too. Elephants are strong. Elephant in the room. There was a lot of good images, and we just decided. And then one of our fans at the show presented us with a hood ornament for the truck that says Edison, and it's this 3D printed elephant, and its tusks are these lightning bolts. And I'm like, that's got to be the
That's
hood ornament of
awesome.
Edison. So we now have like an official hood ornament, and
Oh man, dude, that's so incredibly based. Awesome. Right. So you've got Topsy. Tell us more about Topsy the truck. This is your ground up, full, brand new, working Edison Motors concept truck. You're not using an old platform. Frame up. How did that go? What's it look like? Costs, specifics, details. Tell us all about the truck.
oh well, it looks like we put a tractor cab on a truck, because that's essentially kind of what we did. We did basically kind of took inspiration from a skidder or like a bulldozer cab, and we're like, well, would we put like a bulldozer cab and a skidder hood on a truck, and how would that be? And that's what we did. We built that. Turns out that's a lot of work to build your own, design your own truck. Ton. We did the math. We have like 160,000 man hours that went into the production and engineering of this thing. Oh yeah, it was brutal. But we did it. It's the big differences on this one is that it's got the e-axles. We worked with some really, really talented, great people, some suppliers from kind of around the world to put this driveline system together. And these e-axles are wicked awesome. 52,000-pound rear ends, planetary hub drive. The axles, the electric motors just bolt up to the ring and pinion. So hopefully it can bolt up to, even if it's a lesser spec axle, you should be able to swap it on the event of a retrofit. But e-axles are the way to go. Oh my God, this thing is a monster. Like, it's got power that should not exist in a truck. And it feels weird. Like, I've driven high horsepower trucks and they don't feel like this. Like, I've driven a truck with 800 horsepower, 700 horsepower, same horsepower as our truck, but you have to shift the gear and then you got to wait for your turbo boost. Like, you shift, you throttle in, you wait for the turbo boost to come up, you get that power, and then you're on to the next gear. Whereas this one is just instant torque, no boost, like flatline torque, and there's no gears to shift, so you're just gone. Like, and the amount of torque and power, like, I've never been able to spin tires like that in a truck, which is why part of the thing in engineering we've been doing in Ontario is a lot of that computer work, the throttle mapping, maybe putting in a few different drive modes is what we're working on right now.
So when you say drive modes, you're basically saying like either diff speed or like a transmission of sorts. Because when you say you've got all this torque and it just goes immediately, I'm like, okay, cool. So when you pass me on the highway, do I have to roll the window up to keep the tire bits from coming off? Like, are you guys like spinning the rubber right off the wheels or what?
I mean, yeah, 100% we've been spinning rubbers, but it's called throttle mapping because it's an electric throttle and you're telling basically, hey, if I push on the pedal 10%, how much power do I want to send to the motor? And we said, well, 10% power to the motor. What we found out though is that you kind of don't want that because, like, when you're bobtailing, 20% throttle doesn't feel like you're pushing hard on the pedal, but really you're roasting those tires. And like, we had it to the point where if I farted on the throttle pedal, I was doing a burnout. Like I just went around a corner and I'm like, I accelerated out of the corner and kicked the back end loose. And I'm like, on dry pavement, I shouldn't be able to just kick the back end loose because I just touched the throttle pedal. So what we're doing now is
you've got too much power, and basically you need to use this throttle mapping to come up with settings. So like you can like push a button on the dashboard. I'm bobtailing. I have an empty trailer. I have a half loaded full trailer. I'm pulling super bees. I'm towing a skidder up the mountain. Like, you got to have all these settings, right?
That's right. Yeah, we're gonna do some settings, and then even the way the throttle curve does. So now it's, instead of linear where it's a straight line on the graph, it's exponential. So that last 20% of the power throttle gives you like 50% of the power. And then you can play at low speeds. And then in bobtail mode, it makes that curve more exponential so that when you're bobtailing, you can just ease onto the throttle. And then as you push harder and harder, it gives you more and more power at the end because you're like, oh, I just want to get going. And now I want to throttle hard into it. Whereas when you're loaded, the power is a little bit more linear. So if you hit loaded, then the power is more to linear, and it's, oh, I need more power right at the bottom end of that throttle because I got to get the weight moving. So that's how we're changing these different modes. And then we have bobtail, loaded, and then we have off-road mode. So normally what we do is you apply a little bit of power to the electric motor all the time, and it kind of holds the motor in place and stops the vehicle from rolling backwards, which is great. You're at a light, you're at something that it'll hold the vehicle in place with it until you step on the throttle and get it to move forward, or until you put it in reverse, then it'll move back. But we put it in off-road mode because then in off-road mode, the way we're programming that is that it does not apply any power. If you're not on the throttle, you have 0% power, and then the electric motor can free spool, which allows the motors to roll backwards down a hill. The reason I wanted that for off-road is that I insisted on it is when you're stuck in the mud like a clutch. The biggest problem with automatics is automatics don't let you really rock back and forth like a clutch does. So this one will allow you to rock back and forth. So if you're in snow or mud and you're spinning tires and you're trying to get out, you roll, you get it going a little bit, and then you let off the throttle and the electric motors will spin back like you put it into neutral with the clutch, and then you can throttle on again. So you can play with your wheels the same way that you can when you're driving a standard and you're playing around with the clutch.
Oh, fantastic. A man after my own heart, giving the operator options to get himself out of a jam. Why can't the rest of the engineering world have guys like you directing things so that they think about this when manufacturing tools we're supposed to use in navigating, the roads like this? This is amazing.
Because they need to bring in more guys in the field. They honestly need to bring in, like, if you're building the truck, bring in some truck drivers and tell them, hey, how do you want this vehicle to perform? Like, listen to the mechanics. Listen, like, the engineers need to listen to the operators and the mechanics that work on these things way more into the design process. I think for every one engineer you should almost have one trucker, one mechanic supervising each engineer.
Oh, amen to that. All right. So the truck is in Ontario. It's getting these settings spec'd. Why Ontario? Is there nobody in BC available to do that?
Not really. I mean, we don't manufacture anything over here anymore. Pacific closed down, Hayes closed down, Western Star closed down.
Well, moved, got bought.
Yeah, closed down their factory here. We don't manufacture a lot of vehicles, so a lot of this testing, like a lot of the testing facilities are in Ontario. And Flowdraulic, who's been a great partner, they're doing a lot of the computer programming stuff. They're in Ontario, so like, okay, well then they're programmers that can update the codes, because I can't do programming. I'm a truck driver. I'm not programming the computer. I need somebody that's good at the computer stuff. So they're there. The testing facilities are there. It just made more sense to just ship the truck there.
Right. So we're not going to reveal the location of this place, so you don't have like fanboys like me like looking over the fence. Hey, where's Topsy?
No, we're not quite saying the location of the place there. But if fans are interested, this Saturday, or no, not this Saturday. We are Saturday now. Next Saturday, October 14th, we're having a big meet and greet down towards like Niagara Falls area with D-Boss Garage, if anyone's aware of those guys.
Right. I don't know if this podcast will be out by then, but I'm going to write that down and send it to people. D-Boss Garage in Niagara Falls.
We're going to their thing, and yeah, we're having a big event where people can come meet Topsy.
Are you going yourself? Are you flying out there?
Oh yeah, you betcha.
Oh, dude, I might have to drive home. I'm 3.5 hours from Niagara Falls.
That would be awesome, man.
Oh man, I had, dude. All right, sweet. All right, let's book it. Okay.
It's gonna be a good time because
I can take photos and post it with the podcast and stuff, because this probably isn't going to come out for 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh, okay. Well then. That works. I mean, we can take some photos, do all that, and we're all gonna head out that Saturday night, go out on the town.
Oh yeah,
have a good time.
Oh, dude,
whoop it up a bit.
Yeah, I have to see this truck. Okay,
and it's a big show and shine car show, truck show at the same time too. So
right, I know a bunch of people that would be super interested in this. I'll try and bring a crowd with me. Okay, so Topsy is in Ontario now, but you recently took Topsy to this show and you said it was called Fully Charged?
Yeah.
How did that go over? How was it received? What's Fully Charged all about? Who are some of the other, what were some of the other technologies being displayed? How many people were there? What was the venue? Tell us all about that.
Well, it's fully charged as a big electric vehicle show. They actually no, excuse me. They got their start on YouTube, and he just had a podcast and YouTube about electric vehicles, and it's turned into this big traveling electric vehicle show where manufacturers show off their electric cars. They let you take them for a test drive. I got all Edison Motors employees banned from ever test driving a Ford, but that's another story. Yeah, it's a pure electric vehicle show, and it's more than that. They're showing off like green technologies, sustainable technologies, and I was worried going into this thing because we brought Carl, which is our electric logging truck. So we brought an electric truck to the heart of environmentalism in Vancouver, and then we brought this truck, both of which have these big diesel engines, like they're diesel electric, like a freight train. So I'm like, oh crap, we're bringing two logging trucks with diesel engines into an electric vehicle and green energy show in the heart of environmentalism and movement in Canada and Vancouver. Like Vancouver is like the heart of like no logging, pro electric, and everything like that. So I'm like, I know how our Edison fans receive the truck. They love it. This is the first time that a lot of the general public who's never heard of Edison is going to be seeing this thing. What are they going to think of this big dozer on wheels? And the reception was fantastic. I think the whole event, like we had 50 people at our booth all the time, just people coming to check it out. It was actually funny. Like we had so many people coming over to check this thing out. You looked over like Volvo, Mac, Peterbilt, they would have like maybe one person, two people at their booths. Most of the time, like the salesmen are sitting there playing on the phone. You looked over at the Edison booth and it was just like 50, 60 people all the time being like, what is going on with this thing? It was the fully charged thing said that it was the highlight of the show for them.
Awesome.
It was so well received and I didn't think so. And it turns out like a lot of the people like that didn't know us, they're skeptical. We pulled the butterfly hood open so they could see the big diesel. Like we didn't hide the diesel. And they're like, well, I don't like that it has a diesel. And then we sat down and we talked with them. And we started explaining the benefits of the diesel. It's like, look, a lot of trucks don't have access to charging. A lot of the batteries will not get a semi truck through the day. Like it's only for a niche application. This is a way to transition to maybe in 20 years when the batteries get better, that we can make these trucks fully electric, but this is the way to transition. So right now, the benefits of the generator is that you're not soot loading when you're turbo lagging. You're running at 1 RPM. You run the generator for an hour, and then you drive your electric vehicle for 2 hours off the batteries. So you're driving 1 hour off the generator, and you're driving 2 hours off the batteries. You're showing like a 50% reduction in fuel mileage is what we showed at Carl. Like, you're reducing your fuel, you're burning that fuel cleaner, you're burning it hotter, and this can apply to every single truck on the road. So every truck is going to be seeing a reduction in emissions, reduction in things, even if just a pure battery electric won't. So we explained that emissions point of view, and then we explained our planned obsolescence, right to repair, the ability to just swap the batteries out in 10 years instead of replacing the whole truck, the way we built everything to last. And we built it all without a ton of plastics, and we built this thing strong, and we've explained these. And they left thinking, I really like this. Like at the end of it, I don't think anybody really complained. These environmental people that came there, they weren't against diesel. They were for the environment. They weren't necessarily against diesel. When we could explain that, hey, this is the better way to do the diesel that works for now and is going to be a transition, they're like, yes, I like that. I support that. It makes sense to me. Like they were all logical people. And I was expecting like just super passionate, like the leader of the Green Party actually came by to talk about our truck.
Right. So I want to draw a connection here between this experience you just had at this electric show and marketing and exchanging or trying to persuade people of things. So I want to draw a little parallel here between you and Topsy and Blue and your team at this electric show, and you're getting to have a 5 or 10 or 15-minute conversation with skeptical people that don't exactly know what's going on with your technology. Maybe you don't even know how the nuts and bolts of all these issues work, but you are there in person talking to them, and then you explain it to them and you make your case, right?
Yep.
A lot of advertising and marketing and stuff that happens in the media is 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 15 seconds, pull quotes, flashy nonsense marketing garbage that's like meant to like dissemble and not and it can't, because of the limitations of the format, it can't tell you the actual truth of the matter with any particular issue, product, phenomenon, anything, right? So like you being at this show and talking to people is kind of like being on a podcast. It's like if Joe Rogan sits and like talks with someone for 3 hours about whatever the issue is, you're going to come away with that from that with a much better understanding of that issue rather than watching the news where they talk about something for 45 seconds and you can't possibly wrap your head around it, right? So like here you are at this trade show, and now you've got the leader of the Green Party being like, oh yeah, a transitionary technology to get us from here to utopia without the Holodomor in between, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's great, man. I'm so glad you got like people listening to you and hearing your case.
It's one of the really cool things about social media. Some of the things about social media terrible. One of the cool things about social media is that it levels the playing field. You don't need tons of advertisement. If you've got a good point to make, people seem to listen, and you can explain it. Like back in the day in the 80s, we would have had to do all the traditional advertising. It would have been so hard to explain to people of like, and you get these people who are like, yeah, diesel electric would make sense. And then you got to explain it, but then you got to really work to educate people. Whereas here, I almost think like people want to be educated now. Like people seek out information. Humans are naturally curious. It's why people probably listen to this podcast, is that they want to learn things.
I mean, that's the reason I started it, because I'm curious and I needed an excuse to talk to people like you and like satiate my own curiosity. And we now have this technology where I can like take our conversation, hit send, boom, the whole world can hear it if they want. And and bring it back to politics from before. What a coincidence that last week we find out the CRTC now wants to control podcasts in Canada.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah, no. They just said this. So as part of this Bill C-11 thing that Trudeau passed, the CRTC will require any streaming service operating in Canada that does more than $10 million in revenue to register with them. What does that mean? Well, obviously, my podcast doesn't do 10 million in revenue.
Yeah, neither does mine.
But Spotify does, and TikTok does, and Apple Podcasts does, and Netflix does, and YouTube and Google. So all of the people that carry our stuff are now going to have to register with the government, and then the government's going to be able to come in and say, "Well, we don't like this guy, we don't like that guy."
It's exactly what they're trying to do. It's the same way they blocked Canadian news for being shown. Like that, in my opinion, should almost be an act of treason if the government gets Canadian news. People need to hear about wildfires. They want to hear about political issues. Like that is like pure 1936 Germany kind of thing. Like no news on social media. Like social media was powerful. You could share news articles. You could share stories. The fact that the government would make a rule that says no Canadian news, and I don't want to hear that bullshit excuse where they're like, it's actually Facebook. The government made a law that said Meta, like Facebook and Instagram, has to pay Canadian news advisors because they're making money off the news. So therefore, they need to pay the Canadian news paid. And that's fair. And I agree with that point, is that these large billion-dollar companies are making money off of showing other people's content, put a little bit of money back to the content creators, like the news things, keep the news people employed so they don't have to just survive off begging for ad revenue. But here's the thing, and this is where I'm mind blown that this is either on purpose or they are so fucking stupid that they can't even think about this. Because why didn't they just make a rule that says, like, they're like, oh, Australia did it. Make a rule that fucking Australia did then, or that says you can't not show Canadian news content. All they had to do was pass one line in the legislation that says if you are operating in Canada under social media, you cannot block Canadian news content on your platform. Either Facebook and Meta has to leave Canada, or they have to show the Canadian news and pay for it. So either the government is completely incompetent by not putting that line in, or they knew exactly what they were doing and they didn't want the Canadian news content to be shown.
Maybe both. I don't know.
I believe both.
I've given up trying to make sense of our ruling elites, and I hate to use the word elite because they're the worst people ever. You ever heard the term kakistocracy?
No.
Kakistrocracy, kakistocracy. It's ruled by the least competent and the worst possible people imaginable. They got there not because they're good at things, not because of any merit, not because of any competency.
Honestly, it's one of those ones where the people that go into politics are the exact kind of people that you don't want to be running. People go into politics because they want power, they want a cushy job. Oh, well, I got to work 6 months of the year, show up for 3-4 hours a day and sit in a comfy chair, and I get a bunch of power for it. That's why they go into politics. Honestly, we need more people. Did you see what happened in Denmark there with the tractor and the farmers?
Oh, you mean in the Netherlands? Or is this a new one in Denmark? I don't know.
No, I get Denmark and the Netherlands confused mentally. I'm terrible with that area of geographic things. It's probably Netherlands. One of the Dutch and Denmark and Deutschland. Okay. Some part of that lowlands of Europe, the bypass route, if you were to start a world war, those countries, they got together, and so you know about it. They got together, all the farmers got pissed off, similar to what happened in our trucker convoy. So all the convoy, all the drivers drive to Ottawa, but they took their tractors down, did the same thing with tractors, and they ran. And the government blew the farmers off, did kind of similar things that our government did to the truckers. But then the farmers said, fuck you, we'll just start our own political party, and won a massive majority.
Yeah, in the Dutch Senate. Yep. I heard about that. Yep. Yeah, new farmers party. Yep.
We honestly need something like that in Canada, where a bunch of blue-collar workers get together, make their own party, and it's just, I don't even care. I don't even care. Left wing, right wing, you can have guys from both sides. Just people that are farmers, rig workers, loggers,
the people that make material reality function need more say. Is basically what it's boiled down to.
World experience. Yep. The only requirement from the party doesn't matter if you're left wing, right wing. Yeah, just you've got to be a working class person, 10, 15 years. You got a little bit of common sense on you, and you're just annoyed enough about what the government's doing that you're like the farmers in the Netherlands that say, yep, I've had enough. I'm going to throw my hat in the ring. We honestly need something like that because I'm sorry, I hate the political thing, but I'm not a big fan of any political party. I don't like the Conservatives. I think Pierre Poilievre is a bit of a dick. He's just gone to university. He's not a blue collar guy. He's not working. He's trying to portray himself as a blue collar guy that he's not.
Oh, yeah,
Trudeau, who's at least, you know what? I hate Trudeau, but at least he's honest about being a drama teacher and a thing. He's not he's weaselly, but he's honestly weaselly.
Well,
they're all just in it for themselves. At the end of the day, they're in it for themselves. The only thing I don't like about really Pierre Poilievre is that a lot of his things are his main platform seems to be Trudeau sucks. It's yeah, we know Trudeau sucks. He's I don't like the housing crisis. He's got some good ideas, but we just need some real working people in there with real working solutions, and I wish Canada would start some kind of party like that.
Fuck. Well, maybe Chace Barber is the guy when you're done with your trucks.
No, because here's the thing is, I probably got enough common sense to do well in politics and make probably some good recommendations. I feel I don't really want to say that out loud, but I can toot my own horn, but I feel like I can make some common sense rules. But I've got enough common sense to know that I should stay the hell out of politics. I've got trucks to build. And that's the problem.
Trucks to build. You've got trucks to build.
That's the problem, is that all these smart people is that if you're smart and you've got good common sense, Why would you get into politics? Like, you've got a good little small business, you've got a small trucking company, you've got a family, you're dealing with, like, you want to just, why would you get into the mud flinging of politics, get into all the stress, all the bullshit on that, when you just want to focus on your kid's hockey game? Like, you want to take care of the kids, you want to spend time with the wife, you want to look after your farm, your small business, you just want to go to work or work on your truck. Well, why would you want to go into politics? So they don't. But we really need people like that. It's
Right. Well, the people that are busy and are competent and are doing stuff are too busy, and then the least competent and the people that like are get hung up on ideology and grievances and nonsense and theory, all the theory cells of the world. But anyway, enough about that. So I it's twice now, third time you're out. So you go to this fully charged electric show in Vancouver. You're well received. Leader of the Green Party comes by, talks to you about your trucks. You got lots of stuff happening. It's now in Toronto. It's getting all this testing done on it and settings, and you're mapping, all your torque out. You're doing all this stuff. What's the target date for selling one of these to the public or getting it on the road?
So what we're doing right now is some partnership deals with a few companies, relatively larger companies. And we're going to provide them a truck. They're going to buy a truck, and we're going to build 5 of these next year, deliver them to these companies. They're going to put it into their fleet, their operation, and they're coming on board as almost partnerships. Like, hey, tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like, tell us what we need to fix in real world application. We want that information. What's going to break, what's done well, what's done wrong. And then we can make those design changes before we sell to the public. Because I don't want to just start selling trucks until those trucks are fully fleshed out. I think too many EV companies in the space, they build a couple prototypes and then they say, okay, we need to go out and we need to raise millions and millions and millions of dollars to build a production facility. And then they try and build their production facility based on these prototypes. And then when they start building these things, they realize, oh shit, that part doesn't work. And then they got to change a part that's now there's a production line built around. And you're like, well, now you got to change massive production tooling. You got to change the vehicles you already did. And now you've already paid these things. You've got the debt cost or the financing cost of these shops. And they die on the vine. Whereas I think a small, like, you can't rush to the end stage. We got to build 5 or 6 trucks. We got to get those trucks out to people that are going to use them in the field. They got to tell us what works. And then at that point, we can focus on the heavy bespoke stuff. And then we can start building a small factory that can produce 20, 30 trucks a year. Because at that level, if we do realize that even at this step, oh, okay, well, there's still a few things to change. It's easy. It's a smaller production line. It's easier, more manageable. And then what I'd like to do is lofty goal, but take the company, say public, or raise large capital, and then you can build a production line that builds 1,000 vehicles a year. But it takes 5 years to get there.
Right. Yeah.
That makes sense.
No, you've got an actual plan. You're not putting the cart before the horse or the elephant before the charger, as it were.
Yeah, right.
I mean, and these 5, you don't have to name these partner companies you have as initial investors and partners and operators of the prototypes of your equipment, but perhaps you could tell us what industries are they in, what are they hauling, what are the applications, what are you testing in the real world, what are the test areas where the truck's going to work.
Yeah, I can say that because we do have some NDAs with the companies, and they're like, well, we don't want to announce too much publicly right now. And
yeah, fair enough. But totally
understood. We want to do a concrete mixer, a snow plow, a hydrovac, but the hydrovac company is kind of backing out a little bit, so it might be a volumetric mixer, a logging truck, and then just a heavy haul, low bed tractor. And one wants one for like just city work. And I'm on the fence on that one for bringing them on. It's not the best use application of the truck to move a van around, but they're interested in the electric and the Canadian side, and it's a more unique project for what they want to do. But there's some couple really cool things, and it's exciting because we can show off some of the other benefits. Like talking to the concrete guys, they like the electric, they like the green, they like the fuel savings. But for example, a bigger deal for them is that a lot of cities have noise abatement rules that say, hey, you can't run a diesel engine between 9 o'clock at night and 7 o'clock in the morning in these areas. Problem is, on a large civil engineering project or a large construction project, you want to keep pouring that concrete 24/7. You want that batching plant to be running 24/7, but getting those permits to run those engines and make the noise, and then the people complaining in the area, they don't want to deal with that. So one of the advantages for us to provide to them as a service is that this truck can run fully on battery for a couple hours. So when you're 20 minutes away or 10 minutes away from the noise abatement zone, you shut your diesel engine off, put the diesel engine into off, you drive in on electric, you unload on electric, you leave on electric, and then as your way back to the batching plant, you fire up that diesel engine and recharge your concrete mixer on the way as you're reloading, and then you run back in on electric, which would allow a concrete operation to be running 24/7 a day, even though they don't have to deal with the noise bylaws.
Wow, no, these fine-grained details, the people that sort of like are outside of understanding how material reality functions, how systems work, the interplay between industry and the public, how our infrastructure is created. How do you put up a building? All of this involves trucks at some point. And the sort of the fine grained detail and where your guys' product fits into all of this is just fascinating. And, I hope people listen to this and like take away that it's not just about like, ooh, fancy truck with no emissions or less emissions. There's actually other reasons to do this.
Right? Like certain things like crane operators, like on a wire lining rig, things where they're just going to be holding something for a long period of time or working on site is like, for example, there's cranes on wire lining cranes in the oil patch. You hold the wire lining, you sit there for a couple days holding this thing, but now you got to run the diesel motor on the crane to just sit there and hold something. You're running a 15-liter engine on site, producing noise on site, and you don't need to. Now it can run for a long time just off of its batteries, and then the generator fires up and recharges the batteries. Cool. But it's going to be way more efficient on site. And one of the things that people are actually interested in, and it's becoming more and more of a big deal in the construction industry, is on-site noise. Diesel engines are really loud, and then people have to talk louder. It creates a more stressful work environment. If you can shut those engines off, it's safer. People can communicate more. They can work more efficiently. They're at a lower stress level. It's more work safe. So if you can save a ton of fuel by having the hybrid system in and running your electric PTO, all your hydraulics off electric, you can make a quieter, cleaner, safer work site. And that's factoring into some of these big construction companies more than even just the fuel savings.
Wow, no, that's really interesting that your project here is covering all of these different bases, and to the average person or somebody that's not paying attention, a truck is a truck is a truck, but when you think about all of the vocational uses and various platforms that get built onto trucks and then where they interact with things, and then there's all these other considerations, and then yet more bonuses to having a truck like Blue or Topsy on site.
Yeah, it's one of the really cool projects is a service truck project, little single axle service truck that we're going to do up. And on site, it can run completely quiet for the same thing while the mechanic's working. He can run 3-phase air compressor, 3-phase welder, electric crane, and then we're also putting in the ability for to be able to offshore power, because now a lot of things you're seeing these electric pieces of equipment, say like a little electric excavator, little electric skid steer, and one of the feedbacks we got from the equipment manufacturers that we sat down talking with them, and they're like, oh, well, people say, how do I charge my little electric excavator on site? There's no 3-phase power on site. Like it's a construction site. It doesn't have power hookups for us to plug our machines into. So now we got to run a diesel generator, which looks bad because we're bidding on these contracts with electric equipment because the contract says you need to have X number of mobile pieces of mobile equipment electric in order to bid on this contract. Or if you have these pieces of equipment electric, you can bid at a higher rate on the contract and we'll still give it to you. So, but they're like, then we run a diesel generator. And it's similar to ours, but their thing is that this service truck can pull up, and while guys are on their lunch break, the service truck can go around these things, or at the end of the day, because the pieces of equipment run for about 8 hours. And if they need a top up, the electric service truck comes in, uses its batteries, plugs into these pieces of equipment. While it's charging, the mobile mechanic performs a greasing service. So they do a full service. They give it a little quick field inspection for the day. They give it a greasing, wipe the windows a little bit, and give like those operator services. So it's like, hey, you're going out for lunch at 11. You've got 3 pieces of mobile equipment. Okay, we're going to pull up with our service truck. We're going to grease those things during the lunch break. We're going to plug those pieces in. So while the guy's having lunch, he's going to come back, have his machine greased, and then full batteries ready to go again for the afternoon. It's a value-added service from these OEMs that they can bill for the service truck coming out, but I almost think it's almost like a subscription package. Yeah, you buy your electric truck and now you got to buy your daily servicing. But if you're saving money on fuel, or you're bidding on extra contracts, or that's what you want, if you know your machine's getting greased, you know it's getting serviced, you know it's getting looked at, if in case even the operator isn't. And it's kind of one of those cool other benefits we didn't think of until we were approached about it. So
Yeah, no, that's great. And what you mentioned there about contracts and specifying, you must have X percent of electric equipment or X percent of, sustainable, because under ESG rules now, which I'm sure you've been following this, and all of that has flowed downhill. And so every facet of life now, the sort of activists have got into the corporate world and the finance world, and all of their stupidity is rolling downhill. And now you're seeing it manifest itself in these contracts. So it's almost like the Edison Motors platform acts like a way of complying with it. Like you have this, diesel electric thing that just covers all these bases for companies.
that's exactly what it does. It's a huge benefit for us.
And a huge benefit for your clients and for their clients and for basically everybody involved. That's great, man. Every
Well, yeah,
time,
I mean,
like,
they don't have quite the cost of full electric. We're cheaper than full electric because the batteries are much smaller. We don't have the reduced payload that comes with full electric because, again, the batteries are much smaller. And we don't have the limited range time, but you can still bid on these contracts with the electric vehicles, and it still fills that niche. So it still meets those government regulations without impacting your payload, your productivity, and it saves you a little bit in operating costs. So it's kind of exciting. We've got a lot of interest in the market. We just gotta go slow. We gotta take the steps we need to take and not rush into it too much. It's tempting, and part of us really wants to be like, yeah, people have reached out and been like, well, yeah, you can raise money for a large shop. Like we had one person wanted to talk about $60-70 million to build a large production facility. And I had to tell him, like, it doesn't make sense. We don't know on this truck. Like, yes, this truck works. We've got some data showing it works, but how's that going to work year after year or month after month when we're really packing these loads in? Like, let's get a little farther, learn a little bit more, engineer, get some trucks out to customers, get other people driving these things, other use cases in them, and then figure out if we need to learn a little bit more before we just spend 60, 70, 80 million dollars on a production facility. Plus, if we wait a little longer, the company will, and we get these other trucks out in the field, the company will be worth more, and then we don't have to give up nearly as much equity for the same amount.
right, right. Well, I mean, it shows you've been sort of thinking about this in the sort of short, medium, and long term and how it's all going to work. And again, taking the operator's eye to thing, you want to make sure that the product you're building has gone through a bunch of different use case scenarios. You've gotten the feedback, you've figured out what works, what doesn't, what you need to tweak. Yeah, why rush into it? I mean, it's going to work. It's already sort of proven itself and there's interest out there. Make sure you do it properly.
Yeah. My favorite saying is from Kenworth when they were talking about developing a truck. And in their ads back in like the 50s and 60s, and you can see them, you're like, Kenworth engineers wear muddy boots. That was like one of their sayings. They're like, Kenworth engineers wear muddy boots. our engineers spend more time in the field than they do the office. And Kenworth bragged, like that was Canadian Kenworth, like out of Vancouver. They really, really bragged that their engineers spent more time out on the logging block than they did in the office. They were out where the trucks were working. They were getting the feedback. And that's why, like, I've got a Canadian Kenworth from the 60s that's still operating and driving today because those engineers spent the time in the field. We can't go into production until our engineers spend the time in the field, which means we need to get the trucks into the field to get the engineers in the field to know that if we got a good product or not. So until our engineers have muddy boots, I won't feel comfortable selling a truck.
Man, that's great. That's, there's lots of KW and PACCAR fans out there. So I'm still friends with the Paddocks. Obviously, I worked for them for a long time. Laney Paddock's husband is a big fan of your guys. So I'm going to try and get, some OG Kenworth folks to come out to your little party here in Niagara Falls next weekend. And, the Paddocks were also the last Hayes dealer in Eastern Canada.
No way.
Yeah. And remember how I had my Hayes, my Paddock hat on before they got the Hayes Grizzly Bear? They sort of took over the logo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that I know you guys are coming, ooh, man, we're going to have a party. All right.
This is going to be fun.
Yeah, yes, sir. All right. Well, that's a great way to wrap it up. I mean, that's a good update. I'm glad to hear that Topsy is out there and you have all these plans and you're strategizing and Edison Motors is moving forward. And, just let my audience know where they can find you online.
Yeah, we're on YouTube for Edison Motors. That's if you want to see the real in-depth content, the longer format. And then just Edison Motors on TikTok if you just want 1-minute videos.
Right. Yeah, no, and I'm sure most of your fans are all well into that. But if you haven't heard of them, go check out Chace's videos. They're super entertaining and well produced. You get even more of that awesome accent. And and you get to see the trucks up close. I mean, you guys' videos are great. I can't wait. I can't wait to see Topsy, man. I'm coming to Niagara Falls next weekend. All right.
Awesome. This is going to be a good time. We got a fair few guys going out. I feel like we're going to end up swamping the town.
Right. Chace, thanks so much. I can't wait to talk to you again and meet you in person.
Beauty. Awesome. Looking forward to it. See you next weekend.
All right. Way of the road.